All right. Hello, everybody. This is Nick Klosky from Honeypoint 3D, and I welcome you to the May 2016 monthly 3D printing and 3D design webinar. We'll be going over some questions that people asked in the survey beforehand, and if any of you are online and you would like to join, and let me see right here, and ask questions live, I'm more than willing and actually wanting to answer your questions more than kind of talk about what I was going to talk about. So first, I wanted to give a couple of updates on, Honeypoint 3D, which is my company. I've co-founded this with Lisa, who is my co-founder and my wife, and I run the education side of Honeypoint 3D. And I want to kind of talk about a couple things that are coming up that might be of interest to you. If you are out in the San Francisco Bay Area in about 10 days exactly from now on May 20th, the Maker Faire is happening in San Mateo at the San Mateo Fairgrounds. It's a huge event that's kind of like a family-friendly Burning Man. So a lot of creativity and a lot of things going on. We are talking, Honeypoint 3D, myself and Lisa, we'll be talking there at the Maker Faire on all 3 days, actually on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, about our book. And if I can do this, let me click. There we go. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. I'm not entirely sure what it looks like, but our book is coming out on in Amazon probably in about 10 days or so, very close to when Maker Faire happens. And it is entitled Getting Started with 3D Printing. And it is published by Maker Media. So the people that put on Maker Faire, that put on Make Magazine, as well as the Maker Media organization that puts out a whole bunch of different books on Arduinos and drones and 3D printing and all of that. So we're very excited to be an author on that platform, and that is why we are talking at the Maker Faire, because they really want to get the message about 3D printing out to the public. So I'll leave that up for a couple more minutes, just so that people on the webinar can click on it. But if you just go on to Amazon and you do a search for Getting Started with 3D Printing, then you will see our book there. It's the one with kind of a mesh apple and then kind of a 3D printed layer apple on the right-hand side. So I will remove that. Great. So that was one thing. I wanted to, make sure that people knew about Maker Faire and our book coming out. And there's actually quite a bit happening in 3D printing. Internally to our company, we've had a lot of people from both libraries and school districts contact us to learn about how to teach 3D printing and 3D design, and which is kind of unusual, the number of people that are coming. So it looks like, a lot of people that are designing curriculum and designing services to the public for libraries are interested in bringing 3D printing out there. So that is super great. So I want to get to some questions that people asked in the survey beforehand. We had somebody named Brent who wanted to know about how to translate a picture to a 3D model. Right, so that is in our Meshmixer class. So there's a couple different ways to do this. One way is with Meshmixer if you want to edit that and use it as some sort of kind of feature. And then there's some other easier ways that I'll show you as well. So let me, without further ado, go and share my screen here. And you'll see me fade into infinity here like this. Okay, so before we go too far into infinity, I did a search for an image. So this was a National Geographic photo eyes, right? So everybody is kind of familiar with this picture right here of this Afghan girl a long time ago, and there's like lots of different follow-ups to this. So I downloaded this picture, and there's a few different ways to do it. I want to show you the kind of harder way that uses Meshmixer, but it gives you some skills with Meshmixer that you might not know. So let me open up, this is a program called GIMP, the new image manipulation program. So it's kind of like an open source version of Photoshop, very capable, and I use this all the time. I'm going to open up the image right here. So an image like this, when you turn it into 3D, only looks at the luminance values, so how bright or dark each one of these pixels are. So what I first go is I go up to here to image, and I change the mode to grayscale. So image mode to grayscale. So to turn this into gray. And you can just use this if you want. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll just say export as gray. Export that out. Now, sometimes this is a little bit too much information. You can always go in and go to image to mode to indexed. And right here where it says generate optimum palette, you can say something like 8 colors if you wanted to. And when you say convert, you see this becomes a little bit more blocky, but there are only 8 colors in this. So if you ever need to kind of down res your image, you can do so. But let's try it like this. Now, in order to use this, I did undo, so we have just the normal photo here. So in order to use this most effectively inside of Meshmixer, I'm going to go hit the little crop tool, which is the knife up here, and kind of move this out to the sides. And if you look at the bottom here, you may or may not be able to see it as I move it. It says that the rectangle, we're looking down here at the bottom, the rectangle is 331 pixels wide. So what I want is I want to move this down until the rectangle says 331 by 331, because I want to make essentially a square cut. So 331 by 331. Now I can drag this wherever I want. Meshmixer for this process is better when you use a square image. So I'm going to drag that down. Now I'm just going to click on the image to make the cut. And I'm going to say export as gray square. Like that. Great. So we don't need the GIMP anymore. We'll get rid of that and this. I'll bring up Meshmixer. Expand this out a little bit. And maybe we'll just start with a plane right here. It says import plane. And this is infinitely thin. So what I want to do is I'm going to select the whole thing and extrude it out a little bit. If I press W, we don't have very many triangles here. So I go over this in the Meshmixer class, but I'm essentially going to remesh this maybe a couple of times to make it really, really dense. The whole point of this is to make a very, very dense mesh to start off with, which will then have the picture pop out of it. So I remesh this a couple of times. So that's a pretty dense mesh. That's nice. So we're going to go into here to sculpt, to surface, and let me get rid of these other ones that I did. So we're going to go down here to sculpt, to surface, to stencils, and press the plus button right here. And navigate to where I save this, and I'm going to select the gray square. So now in stencils, we can go and click on this image. I'm going to make my brush bigger. That. And I'm going to go to maybe draw 3 like this, turn down strength a little bit, and click and see what happens. If I turn wireframe off, you can see that from the front, that is kind of the girl. And if we zoom in here, you can see that it is kind of bumpy right here, but it is definitely the girl when we look face on. I'm going to undo that and go back in. Under refinement here, I can, I have reduction turned down. I could reduce it a little bit if I don't want that much smoothing, and then try this again. and kind of pop her out like that. So that is definitely 3D printable, except some of these things might be pretty small, right? These little spires. But this is definitely something you can use to create, all sorts of different patterns on your mesh. If we make this smaller, we might be able to see the detail a little bit more. Right, her eyes are kind of popping out. So what this is, if you remember this square right here, let me drag this over, you can see that her hair is dark and her eyes are white. So in this, everything that is dark is staying down and everything that is light is popping out. If we do this stencil, you can see that it's dark on the right-hand side and light on the left. So when we do this, it comes out following that. The light parts come out, the dark parts stay down. So that's one way to do it. But this isn't the best way to do it. There's a couple different ways. If you have a 3D printer, you can open up, this is a free slicer program called Shura that slices 3D images, or actually slices 3D models. But if you just go here to File and Load Model, you can actually select an image. And if you select an image, it asks you how tall you want it to be, 10 millimeters, with a 1 millimeter base, with it to be 99 by 99 millimeters. And, maybe do a little bit of smoothing, and we could maybe have a 0.5 millimeter thick base, and you click OK, and then it brings in the image, and it does actually looks like a little bit better job than Meshmixer. And this is just a 3D model. So you can say File to save model, and you can say this is gray Cura.stl. And then after a second, it will load up as a 3D model, and now I'm actually opening it in Meshmixer. Meshmixer will think about it for a little second, and there is the model ready for you to do whatever you want with. Now notice that Meshmixer has shown some open boundaries essentially everywhere on here. So you might need to do a little bit of work to fix that, but it is something that you can edit as well. So that is one way to do it. Now the last way to do it is to go to a web page. So let me go here, and this is a web page called 3dp.rocks. So 3dp rocks / Litha Fame. If you just go to 3dp rocks, no, not rocks, rocks. Then there are lots of different things that you can do inside of here, ring makers, but it's this image to Litha Fame converter. So you click on this, and you get some options here. If you click up here on images, it asks you to choose a file. So I'm going to choose maybe the square right here. It thinks about it for a second, and then it creates a Litha Fame here in your browser. And you can also do other things, inner curve, outer curve. So if we click on inner curve and say refresh, it thinks about it and creates a 3D model. And if you say download, it will download it. And you can open that up in Meshmixer as well. Once it comes up after a second here. There we go. Now, these are probably not optimized for 3D printing. They may not let enough light through for creating something that would be 3D printed, but that is a way to create an image as well. And stop. There we go. So hopefully that gives you some options on how to use some tools to create a 3D model out of an image. And then those are just 3D models. They can be used anywhere for anything, just like any 3D model could. Awesome. So the other thing I wanted to talk about today, which is something that happened in my own life, was I needed to hang some stuff up in my garage. And since I own a 3D printer, I thought, well, why don't I just create hangers for things? And so I did. So I want to show you how I created those and how I went about that. I have some different examples here. These are safety glasses, right? And so I was just hanging these on a nail, but since I'm a 3D printy person, I wanted to hang these on something 3D printed. So I created a little hook like this. Super duper simple, but it just goes on and these hook on like that. And then this gets screwed into the wall. So that's one that I'm going to be talking about. The second is for a vacuum cleaner that we had, but we lost any sort of mounting bracket for that. If you notice, there is a little lip behind here, you can see. And so I created just a little bracket for this, but it goes in, this screws into the wall, and then this sits on and it presses against the wall and works perfectly like that. The other thing I wanted to show, which is pretty awesome, is I have something that my 3-year-old loves to look at, but I never let him play with, is a little butane torch that I use for different projects. So I go like this and go, right, torch. This is very, very useful. I use it for a whole bunch of different things, or heating up, you know, little parts and all of that. But I didn't want my little guy to touch this. So I wanted to put it on the wall instead of have it in a drawer or whatever. So I created this awesome little thing with a hole in it. So this gets mounted onto the wall, and then this is an awesome, awesome fit. It won't even fall when it comes out, but with a very light touch, it just pops out. This is actually a really, really nice fit, and I modeled that. So those are the 3 things I'm going to be talking about today, and they're pretty fast, but I want to just kind of give you some strategies for how you would actually model these things, because that's what most 3D printing or 3D design people want to know about, is the strategies behind how to actually model things. So we'll start with this hook. This is the hook for the safety glasses. Very, very simple. And this is something that I did actually in Meshmixer because I wanted to use a couple different tools. So the thing that you should really get, that I really highly recommend, is this for about $12 or so on Amazon, are digital calipers. So you move these and then you can kind of see that it gives a measurement. So I have, you know, a little phone here. If I wanted to make a case for this phone, I would go like this, and if I do it in the proper way, I can see that this phone is, I guess it's kind of backwards for you, but 68, you know, about 68, about 70 millimeters wide, right? So you can use this to start to create some, actually lots of things. I use this quite a bit. So for this hook, I didn't measure it too much, but I just knew that I wanted something that was, you know, around 40 millimeters square with just a hook coming out. So in Meshmixer, that's very easy. Let me share my screen again and show you. Go back here. So in Meshmixer, actually, let me just start like this. So let me start with nothing. Close all of these Meshmixers down. So Meshmixer doesn't allow you to just start with nothing. You have to start with something. So I just said import bunny, but I'm going to get rid of the bunny later. I'm going to go here to Meshmix, and I'm going to go down to a cube right here and just drag this into open space. Then it asks here what the size I want is. And I want this to be 40. And it says it does everything the same, so it's uniform, but that's not what I want. I want 40 by 40 by, you know, something around 5 millimeters. And I am going to say accept. And I can click on the bunny and click the trash can to get rid of it, and click back on this object. So that is kind of my plate, you know, what I want to create a hook out of. And this was as simple as just going to the sculpt tool, to a draw brush, and making sure all my things, yeah, refinement and reduction are all the way up. And then just starting to kind of click and draw this outwards. So you remember, if you hold this down, flow is turned on right here. If you hold this down, it's building outwards. I'm going to hold it down a little bit more until it looks kind of proportionally correct. And now I'm kind of going to go up a little bit like that. And if that isn't too good, you can hold down the control key and it undraws. So it kind of goes down and you can kind of keep refining it that way until you get what you want. And you know that this is kind of right because you know that this square is 40 by 40. So proportionally, that looks kind of right. We can go here to Meshmix, and this is a cylinder. We can drag a cylinder onto the model and say dimension, right? To make this dimension around 3 millimeters or so. And it's a little tiny bit off. You know, you can drag this around and then say accept and transform this. I'm going to make it much bigger like that, so it cuts all the way through my object. And select my object, select the cutting tool, and do a Boolean difference. You know, and I would have done a little bit more remeshing on this if I were doing it for real, but that's kind of the workflow. That cut a hole through that plate for a screw to go through later. And go back. So that is just a very kind of quick overview of how to use Meshmixer to create something organic. Now, I want to use another couple of examples for Fusion to show you how I made those two things for the vacuum and for the other one, because for the butane torch, because those are a little bit more complex, but also pretty useful. So let me go into and share. Let me bring up Fusion here. I think I'll just try sharing the Fusion window if I can do that. There we go. You can see it. Good. Great. So what I did with this to create the vacuum bracket is you can do this in a couple of ways. Now, certainly the easiest way is to create a sketch and then just draw the bracket, right? So you can do this in any way that you want. You know, say that the bracket needs to be, you know, kind of these dimensions on the wall, and then even with a line, you can say, and then the bracket kind of needs to come up here at this angle and then come down. And if you want to be real fancy, you could go in and say sketch and trim this little line in here, like that. So now you have a bracket like this, and you just right click on it and say extrude. You know, and this would match what your you know, angle would need to be to go into your vacuum that you measured. So that's certainly one way to do it, but I want to show a different way how I did it. So I'll load up the vacuum bracket here. So first I started with what I wanted to go on the wall, and next I extruded that out, right? So I started with a sketch and then I extruded that out. And then I created a plane at an angle. So I knew that I wanted this to end up somewhere over here. So I used this edge down here, and I went to construct plane at angle. And I made this plane at a specific angle that I thought would work to this. And then I created an offset plane from this plane. So I moved this plane out. I drew the end result on this plane, what the end of the bracket would be. I drew a square on the bottom of this bracket, the bottom of the wall plate. And then I did a loft. I lofted those two things together. And then I added some other kind of nice things like little fillets down here to make it a little bit stronger of a material. And then up here to make it a little bit nicer. Now, the reason why I did that was if I wanted to have some sort of swooping transition, you can do that with a loft. You can, you know, loft from this plane to another plane to another plane to another plane to this plane if you wanted to, and have it kind of be nice and wavy if you wanted to. You could certainly do this with just a side profile sketch, but I wanted to kind of figure out how to do this with lofting, which is why I did it that way. So let's go into the butane holder, which was the torch. Let this load up for a second here. There we go. I'll get rid of the vacuum bracket. So this was the torch holder. This was actually not that hard to do. If we go back here, what I did with this is I knew that I wanted the torch to be in an upright way. So I just took my digital calipers. I measured what distance, what width it was. This looks about 25 millimeters. It's a little bit thinner on this side, about 20 millimeters. And then I knew that I wanted it to go up, maybe about 40 millimeters. So it was a nice secure connection. So I'll go back and share my screen. So that's what I did here. I started off with let me go back to the beginning here. I started off with a sketch. So this is the shape. This is an ellipse, the shape of the butane torch. I then extruded that out. I don't need to make it look like the torch because all I care about is just the shaft of it. So that is the part that will be cut out of the other object to the length that I want. And then I went in and I just created an object in the sculpt environment. I just started off with a box and, kind of like a, actually finished form. Let me create a box. So I just started off with something that was, vaguely the size that I wanted and tall, and I made it a little bit more defined. Now, best practice with this is that you always have like this, an even number of faces, because that gives you a line in the center across which to mirror. If we went one more, you see there's no real line here and the mirroring gets kind of weird. So, something like that. And of course, this would be on top of that circle, so you'd be able to model to that. But I use the trick of, selecting, actually, let me turn on symmetry. I want the left and right to be the same. So I went into the thing and I, selected all of the faces that I wanted to modify, went into edit form and held down the Alt key. When you hold down Alt and move, it starts a new extrusion out. So you're able to create kind of cool effects like this. If you just pull it, it just opens it like this, which you may want. But if you hold down Alt, it will create a new face off of that. And you hold down Alt again, something like that. So I just went down and created a shape that encompassed this entire cylinder the way that I wanted to. And let me hide this kind of test body that I did. And then I did a combine with cut. So I had this cylinder inside of here, and I cut that cylinder out of the body. And then here's something that I did too. I said offset faces. So what this is this was a perfect match to the butane holder. And I don't want that. I want it to be a little bit bigger. So I could certainly go in to the sketch and change the sketch, but sometimes you want the sketch to be perfectly what you're modeling in the butane holder. So I just clicked on this. I right-clicked on the side of this kind of shaft, and I said press pull. And that allows you to make things a little bit bigger or smaller. So what I did is I just made this a tiny bit bigger, maybe 0.3 millimeters around, a little bit larger, so that when I 3D printed this, I would have a little bit more room. So that's what I did, and then just did the other little cuts. What I did here was, look at the sketch from the front. I created a sketch right here of these 3 holes for the screws, and then extruded those out to cut, essentially by selecting them, right-clicking on them, and saying extrude. And then as you drag them in, if it were actually going to be, well, here, I'll show you. I can press pull this one to make it smaller. And now when I extrude this, it creates until it hits something, and then it says, oh, you probably want to start cutting now. So then it cut. So I did that for all 3 of those holes to create the screw holes. And that is how I created the butane holder. And then all of those mounted on my wall, and I have some really awesome things. And you notice that you don't have to create things that look like this, right? Just a little hook. Totally works, is nice, but this butane holder is really nice looking. It has like these weird, if I can show it, these weird little bevels on it that you can see that are part of that T-spline sculpt shape. It's a really interesting shape, and it looks beautiful on my wall, and it fits super duper perfectly with this butane holder. If I go back, actually, I want to show you just one more here in Fusion. I created a little mounting block for some automatic wire strippers, where you just put the wire inside and it automatically strips it for you. It's like black magic. So this is this kind of a triangular or trapezoidal shape. Right here is what holds the strippers on the wall, but I created kind of a little butterfly shape around it because I just wanted it to look pretty on my wall. Like, why not? And that is the real awesome thing about 3D printing, is that you can create anything. So if you're going to create anything, you can certainly create things that are utilitarian, but if it just takes you a couple more minutes to create something that's beautiful, why not, right? I mean, that's what 3D printing is about. It's about unlocking your creativity and learning the tools so that a couple little brushes with a brush, or going into Fusion and doing a little bit of work in T-splines, and you suddenly get something that beautifies your environment. Why not, right? That's what 3D printing is for. And so that's one of the things I really wanted to go over in our tutorial today is how to use these tools from a strategy perspective of how to use measurements to get certain places. But then once you're done with that, why not look and see how you can make it pretty, or make it something that makes your environment happy and more alive than just utilitarian. So with that said, I don't have any questions from any of the attendees, but I really appreciate everybody. Actually, we have quite a number of people joining today. I really appreciate everybody joining, and I look forward to answering your questions for next month's webinar. And in the meantime, happy printing. Thanks so much. Bye.